Hey, this is Mike Lindsay from BioMX. I'm here with Adam Bailey from SX Global, and I can imagine this is a much less stressful week. The deed is done, the championship is over. So, first off, starting, how do you guys feel about the first year?
Yeah, good. Thank you. I mean, we definitely feel like we're proud of what we achieved. I mean, first and foremost, I think we're proud to, you know, have a couple of great attendances. We had 35,000 in Cardiff, and then 50,000 over 2 days in Melbourne, which is great. And we feel like the fans were into it and vocal, and that was the number one thing I think for us. If you were going to pick anything, the number one thing was that we had an awesome fan reaction, and I think that is the thing that we're most proud about. Operationally, production wise of the event, TV broadcast, all those things. Between Cardiff and Melbourne, made huge improvements, but there's still a long way to go. But at the same time, the reason why we did this pilot season was to iron out those things. It was to demonstrate, I guess, our ability to prove the concept, to engage with fans, in a couple of, vastly different regions, which we did, and iron out the kinks and put our team, in a real life environment to kind of, prepare for next year, really. So we ticked all those boxes, and overall, we're happy.
What do you feel like were the biggest lessons learned at Cardiff before you guys went to Melbourne? What was on like the top of your checklist too that you guys felt like you could improve, and did you feel like you met those improvements going into the Melbourne round?
Oh God, there was so many. I think there was something like 80 odd, really critical debrief notes that we had following Cardiff. And not small things, like quite big things that we realized that needed to be changed and needed to be fixed. And we pretty much ticked all those off, but they were things like scheduling and slight adjustments to the schedule to ensure that the main event races, the GP races at the end of the night, had enough time to breathe in between. So that made the competition better. There was, obviously many logistical kind of behind the scenes things that changed and improved. But for us, the number one things were, broadcast, trying to make sure that, it was tighter, yet also, the quality of the shots were better, which they were. There's from the actual live event, and how what's unique about what we do is that we really focus on a broadcast show, but also a live event show. And those two things don't generally talk to each other very well.
Mm-hmm.
If like anyone that has been to an event and seen a for broadcast event, you can really see the difference where the event is quite stagnant, except for when the broadcast says go, and the broadcast really controls the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what you see on the TV isn't necessarily, the same entertainment package that you see on the ground. And what we try to do is manage both, which is really tough, to have a live show where people are engaged, that are in the stadium, without compromising the live broadcast, and vice versa, is a really tough balance. So we didn't always get it right. There was definitely areas where, for example, the live event for the fans was dead because you're waiting for broadcast, and vice versa. There's confusion around things. Our podium in Cardiff was a mess, for example, because we had a live show merging with the live event, and when they merged together at that point in time, it didn't work. So we had to completely change that for Melbourne, as an example. So there's lots of things, and that balance of bringing those two elements together is one of the most difficult parts of what we do, and it was better in Melbourne, but still not there completely. So I think that, those are the main things that sort of spring to mind of, areas of improvement, that we recognize straight away that we made, but we still didn't get all the way there, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that, because I never got to experience your guys' OzSX Open events, but I always heard the live in-person show was one of the best parts of it. I heard that the fans that went to it in person really enjoyed it. So coming into these, hearing you say that that's actually where you guys felt like maybe at Cardiff was one of your weaker points. Was it because you guys haven't had to focus so much on the broadcast before? You guys maybe went too far worrying about that? Is because, like I said, it sounds like from what I've heard before, the in-person is something you guys are really good at.
I think, it's a combination of things, and it's, again, the reason why we wanted to do this pilot season, but being in Cardiff and being on, the other side of the world to where we're from in a completely new venue, a new location, and we're really lean on the ground with people. Travel expenses and things are out of control at the moment, as people would know. So, and when you're not in your hometown, so to speak, you don't have favors to call on, you can't just call on an extra 10 people to come give you a hand, because that extra 10 people for us to go to Cardiff was is probably $100,000 in travel and expenses and things, you know what I mean? So we had to run it very, very lean, and also there's a lot of nuances when you're in a new location in terms of the broadcast team. Even, there's 45 people that make up the TV broadcast team alone, and of those, only 5 were ones that we had taken with us. So then there's 40 people that are new to what we do, essentially, and new to working with our team. And, so I think it's a combination of, it's probably really just was a matter of the fact of being in a whole different region for the first time, a new venue for the first time, lots of new people in our whole business, lots of new people working in that region that we hadn't worked with before. And, sometimes you just make mistakes. We have the schedule that certain things in practice just didn't work as good as planned or as expected, and you didn't have enough contingencies or space to change things at the last minute. So, I think most of the issues, to the trained eye, some might have picked up, but most of the issues or most of the things that we wanted to improve on, the live fans that were there wouldn't have known. But for us, we knew, so it was, we're very proud of the product we put out first time, given all those things. And most of all, that the fan experience and the fan reaction was phenomenal. But we know that we can do better, and we're our hardest critics, that's for sure.
Outside of the actual racing itself, of course, you guys had a lot of your top names over earlier. There was a lot more of a local press functions to these, a lot more like what we see in MotoGP and F1. Were you guys happy with the response you guys got on those? The amount of publicity you were able to get locally? Did those events, did the riders and everybody involved seem to enjoy those, or?
They did, yeah. I think the response from riders and teams was amazing. I think that our team worked really hard to be super inclusive of them in all of the planning and try and spread the load, in terms of the publicity for the teams and riders, because everyone has their own unique story. And as you go around, the world in time, then the different riders will have more appeal in different regions, So, for example, we obviously lent heavily on Dean Wilson and Max Anstie in the UK because of where they're from, and that's who they are. And then, coming to Australia, Chad Reed would take more of the forefront. And obviously he was injured, but it's just how we sort of try and spread the load is something that we'll work on. But again, I think a lot of new people, a lot of new relationships, even with media in these regions, etc. too, and overall the response was great.
So for Melbourne, you guys were able to do basically the local national series for Friday night to have mix some practice in. Some of the guys actually compete in both series because you have a good amount of teams that are Australian based. I know that's not always going to work out. Like, there's not always going to be a local regional series, but did it make you guys rethink at all some of your venues and what time of year they run, whether it's like, let's say around in Britain, or if it's something that can be done in Germany or France that has their own Supercross series? Was there enough positive there for the fans getting 2 nights? It's like, hey, let's maybe see if we can get some of these venues to work out with a regional series. If possible, does it give you guys, were you guys already had that mindset, or did it change your mind at all seeing how Melbourne went?
We did have that. We definitely had that mindset. And in an ideal world, that's something we'd like to do, is because we want to use the World Championship to help build up the domestic championships around the world too, because that's how it should feed riders into this championship in time. So that was always part of the strategy, and having the Australian Championship on the Friday night, was a test case to see how that could work. There's a lot of difficulties with it because we had, and especially in year one, we had riders that riding on World Championship teams that are different to the Australian Championship team. I mean, Matt Moss, for example, raced a Yamaha 450 with his team in Australia on Friday night, and then raced a Kawasaki 250 with the Bud Racing team in the World Championship on Saturday night. Now, that's not ideal, obviously. But, that those kinds of difficulties were things that kind of popped up that we weren't necessarily expecting, and but overall, I mean, the fan reaction again on Friday night was amazing. And they were far more vocal than I probably expected, and the racing was incredible. I mean, Aaron Tanti, really had a really strong battle leading the races and battling with Brayton, which was incredible. Max Anstey put on a fantastic show. Having Dino in there put on a fantastic show. So the racing was really, really good, and as an entertainment package, it was amazing, honestly. And so I think that could happen in regions around the world, and if we can, and also, sorry, just to add to that, is that the domestic championship here, which is the Fox Australian Supercross Championship, is I think bolstered by the World Championship in terms of now the rider talent that it has. Having Dean Wilson in it, or Justin Brayton and Max Nancy, for example. Serco Yamaha has brought in Justin Thompson from Canada, and there's as well as the Australian star riders. So the plan is that World Supercross lifts the game and gives opportunities, and also just gives that kind of level of motivation for those domestic championships and the teams within those to step up what they're doing too. And I think that has happened here in Australia, and that they've got the second round of the Australian Championship this weekend in Adelaide in South Australia, then a third round in Newcastle at the end of November, and then the fourth round in Wagga Wagga, New South Wales, and the depth of talent in those is, I think, lifted as a result, and I hope that the fan interest is lifted as a result. So if we can do that all the way around the world, then I think it sort of proves the concept, but it doesn't come without its challenges, for sure.
So I want to hear your thoughts on, speaking of just purely the racing product, the teams, the riders. I remember before the first round, we did a little predictions podcast, and I can say I was drastically wrong on the bottom half of the field. Like, not bad way. Like some of your bigger teams in there, HP, MDK, some CDR, and some of the ones I expected between the rider list they had and the organization quality, the riders do well. But like, big hats off to like GSM and Bud. I felt like Bud extremely overperformed. Some of those are really cool to watch. Some of the teams that bit earlier on their riders, that were smaller teams that maybe got overlooked in this series, I think really stepped up to the plate. Again, coming into this, you guys had a group of teams that were kind of all placing, hey, it's a new starting point, it's an even playing field. But even with that, some of them had different past racing experiences, but ones I wouldn't have expected to do as well as they did. So I mean, for you guys, has that been a positive, showing from the product standpoint, like, hey, we really did start a series that kind of gave a lot of these guys a fresh start. Some of these names that maybe the American crowd, particularly because they're Supercross watchers, saw a lot of names beat guys they probably didn't expect, and teams do better than they expect.
Yeah, totally. We're really proud of that, because I think there was riders that performed better than expected, and and teams performed better than expected, like you said. But it did prove the concept, which is, when you take this show around the world, there's quite an equalizer there, because all of them are battling different challenges. They go to a different region they've never been before. There's jet lag. There's they didn't practice like they do when they race in the US. They're not able to. Their bikes are on the road. They're traveling for multiple days. It changes things. It means that there's a different type of challenge that they face when they come and do World Supercross events. So as I said, the jet lag and being in a completely different environment, the whole travel schedule itself, the lack of practice in between the events, it changes things up. And I was stoked to see some unpredictable results happen, and I think that's what this championship will bring. I think it'll change things, and there'll be riders that perform better than expected, and others that will perform worse than expected, because it's completely different, and it's just a very different environment than what they're used to.
Speaking of equalizers, question I was really curious to ask you after experiencing now the first two rounds is the tracks themselves. So we know going into this, you guys talked about trying to have tracks that were, I think the last time we spoke, the quote was something more like 90% of a typical Supercross, trying to get them a tick mellower, a tick safer in a way. That's always a plus and minus, because we to a more extreme version of that in the US when we did our first year of futures, where they were really taming the tracks down for the amateurs. The tracks got really fast, they're really easy, but the problem is, because they were so easy, everybody was trying to find a 10th anywhere because they were running so tight that some of the crashes end up being at times worse because the speeds were higher and they're pushing so hard. We saw a lot of really weird incidents at the races for the tracks being a tick on the mellower side. Has it made you guys look at track designs at all? Kind of like, where do you guys chalk up some of the issues? We know with, of course, with Grant and Reed, we're technically related to their bikes, but again, for the couple races, we had a lot of highlight moments of guys pushing on each other harder than expected. Did you guys foresee that happening, or did it catch you off guard?
I mean, I think again, we just didn't know. Like, I think it's just a huge, learning, and you're right. I mean, it's a complete balance, which we always knew it would be. Is of too easy again, as you're completely right in saying that this just means it pushes the speed up, and then people are taking even more risks to make tiny gains. So that is difficult. But what I do think is that the balance was right in that the racing was close and unpredictable, like we said before. Yep. And I think that's the number one thing, that the racing and competition has to be close and unpredictable, and it was that. But safety wise, it will be an ongoing balance, and which is why we engaged Jason Baker at Dream Tracers. We just feel like he can take all that information in. He wasn't at Cardiff, but was in Melbourne. He can see what happened on the track, see what happened in the racing, and we can discuss how we continue to improve. But yeah, and I think it's not that any obstacles need to be removed or drastically changed, but it's the combination of what obstacles you have and where on the track and things that is probably the number one thing. We just got to continue to assess that each time. I think it's a constant evolution. It's an incredibly difficult and challenging and dangerous sport, as we know. So you're not going to eradicate injuries, but we want to give everyone the best chance of racing safely, but also closely. So, I wouldn't say that we have the magic answer, and we never thought we would, but we do want to continue to make steps. And I think that the racing, the crashes and the accidents that happened were part of the racing element, and not just riders trying to survive the track. And that was first and foremost, we wanted to remove the element of riders just trying to survive the track. And I think we removed that, but it doesn't mean that then there's not still racing incidents and things that happen because of people racing the track. So it's a tough balance. So we'll have to continue to work on it. There's no question.
I could also imagine once you guys get into a longer series, it might change the mentality and pacing of some of these guys, because I can imagine they probably felt like it was a short series. So I think, judging even by people I knew they're racing that have raced some of these same guys, they're like, I just don't know what they were thinking. They were taking risks I'm not used to X rider taking when racing me. But I guess I kind of could also understand it, because they're thinking if they had one bad main, they're like, well, I've only got so many to make it up here. So I could also imagine as the series grows in length, that also might kind of help fix itself from a mentality standpoint with some of these guys.
Yeah, totally. And there was a lot of energy in the room. There's a lot of, the fans were really vocal, really into it. And these are young men that have a lot of testosterone, and they're hungry to win, and they wanted to make a mark, like you said, in a short championship. And that is, again, will be one of the things that the championship will bring out, is the people that can play the long game, that can handle the travel, that can can operate professionally in the highest level for the whole season, kind of thing. So yeah, I think there was just a bit of excitement, that needed to be tempered, perhaps.
Talking about the actual race format, from you guys after you sat down, went over both the events, what do you guys feel like was the biggest positive of the format you brought to fans, and what was, at the end of it, the biggest question mark you even have about your own format that is a consideration in the future?
Sure. Well, I mean, first and foremost, I think from an entertainment perspective, it was great. I think like Cardiff was too tight, and we recognized that, because whilst the racing was close, there wasn't enough time to tell the stories and bring the crowd up to speed with where the racing is at, and to build, tension throughout the night to the end, which is really key. We had that a lot better in Melbourne, and I think it worked well. I mean, it helped that Kenny got a flat tire, which none of us expected, and that added to the whole tension and excitement of the whole thing. So there was some really cool storylines that came out of it. But I think there's merit to do we need more time still before that last one? There's been ideas thrown around about maybe the last race of the 3 isn't back to back, and they interchange between the 2 to give even more time, to build some of the storylines. And those are the kinds of things that we'll throw around, between us, and maybe we'll test in the new year. But I think overall the racing was great, and from an entertainment perspective it was great. So I think the format's really worked. Can they be improved upon? Yes, I'm sure that they can, for sure too. So there was no huge runaway wins, which I thought again was what we're aiming to achieve, and the fans were literally on their feet at the end of multiple races. So I thought that was a good thing.
Any chance of a SX2 Super Pole? I know personally I've always been a big fan of the Super Poles, so I would definitely love to see the 250 guys get it too.
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's something that we'll throw around for sure. I think, I agree. I think it's good. I really love that element. I really enjoy as a hardcore fan watching them on the track and by themselves, and to see what they do and how they do it. And it's really cool, and blows my mind every time that when you see riders do new obstacles during their Super Bowl lap, or trying something that they hadn't done all night. Josh Hill doing the quad in Cardiff, and then Kenny follows and does the quad, and which they hadn't done. I thought that was really, really cool, and those are really exciting elements that the Super Bowl brings out. So yeah, I think we'd definitely be open to having the SX2 class do it as well, if we can fit it from a scheduling perspective. But because I agree. I think that was definitely a great success.
I think it's a real cool, from being somebody that's worked on team and work with suspension, like team mechanics, crew chiefs, those kind of guys get to experience that. They go to test tracks and they watch their one guy hit heaters, hit sections perfect. And it's really cool to watch the nuances of, if they hit everything perfect, what they do on the bike, the kind of stuff you don't have the time to watch when there's a lot of guys on track and there's a lot going on. Again, if you're somebody on teams, you get to experience it day in and day out, but something a fan doesn't get to see. And it is, it's so many guys using a track to just watch one guy in the moment go at it. It's pretty cool to watch. Like I said, there's a lot of little things you pick up that you normally just wouldn't get the time to recognize and see.
Totally, and like hear the bike. You can, when you can hear someone's bike, you can really learn a lot about what they're doing and how they're doing and how they're riding the bike. And as a racer and a hardcore fan like yourself, that's really, really interesting. I find that cool to be able to really hear what they're doing and how they're riding the bike at the time. Whereas when there's 20 guys out there, you just can't. You really don't know what they're doing in that sense. So it adds a whole other kind of dimension, really, to how much you can understand the way they're riding the track, which I think is cool too.
Something I was really curious about with the point structures that you guys did, actually paying points per main. I thought about, so say we go to 10 rounds next year or something like that. That technically means we're basically racing from a point standpoint, you're basically awarding 30 main events of points. Say we have a situation, Ken Roxon decides to race again next year, the whole season, somebody of a really big caliber that could potentially run away with a championship. It's kind of weird, because definitely there was a lot of chaos between the 2 rounds, a lot of up and down, so nobody really got these big points hauls. But has it crossed your guys' mind at all, like, what if somebody went on a tear here? Could they wrap up the championship by like main 18 or 19 or 20 of the year? Like if they just start raking out those wins, is that something that's have you guys considered the point structure at all, or it kind of, where this is only 2 rounds, will you guys just see kind of how it works next year in a longer series before further making any changes in that sense?
Yeah, I think it was a no-brainer given how short this year's series was. It's barely a series, but is really, really short. So to have 6 point scoring races, over the 2 events, I thought was super important. I think that we would have to trial it over. I don't think we'd want to make drastic changes on things like that until we've gone through a full series and see whether it does or doesn't work, because there's kind of equal argument to say, well, someone could go on a tear, but also you've still got to have 3 races each time, and they'd have to go on an enormous tear. And then if they miss a race or miss 2 races, someone else can do the same thing in reverse, kind of thing. So yeah, I really don't know. I think that's what's exciting about it. It's unpredictable. I really don't know how it'll pan out. I think, and we want to be different. We're liking kind of the envelope and trialing it out. And I think at this point in time, this year proved that it worked well. We came into that very last moto, the last GP race out of 6, with 3 people really having a good chance at winning the title, which is cool. So, and there was literally only a couple of points in it. So I think how that'll pan out over a longer series, I think we'll see next year and then go from there.
Another question I had was about some of the talent for specific teams. This is not to throw anybody under the bus, but I think it's an honest conversation to have, especially in your guys' series is a little different because the teams are sort of business partners. So if your guys in this situation, you guys are helping them out, but in turn, they need to bring, they're expected to line up with good talent. I felt like a few teams, again, some smaller teams I didn't expect to maybe do as well as they did. I think they did their homework. They got guys early. They put in the effort to get these guys comfortable. And then some teams I expected to put a better foot forward, kind of drop the ball, and were hiring riders 3 or 4 days before your first event. To sadly say, a couple did things like that. Are those kind of conversations you guys kind of have to have? And do you guys feel like because you're in more of a partner situation, are these conversations you can have with the teams of like, hey, like there's certain expectations here because I think, for the teams, it doesn't look good. I don't think it looks particularly great for you guys if some of them are being kind of lazy in that sense in there when you have teams that clearly put in the effort and made it work.
Totally. I mean, it's one of those things that the results do, speak for themselves, quite a lot there. In some cases, I mean, the MDK guys, had a shocker in terms of luck, and I was disappointed to see what happened there because they felt like they did try and put their best foot forward.
Yep.
And it just didn't work out. But the beauty of the structure really is that we can have those conversations. There is performance expectation as part of our agreement, and teams do have to provide a level, to justify the appearance fees that they receive from us. And you're right, some put more of a foot forward than others, and I think that demonstrated in the results. But I really hope now that having shown the platform that we want to deliver, that those teams, all of the teams are motivated by that, which it sounds like they will be, to see, okay, this is worth investing in. I understand some, wanted or needed to be conservative, not knowing what it was we were going to produce. But, there's definitely an expectation now that for 2023, they invest into the series as much as we're investing into them, and that they do show up with the best possible team that they can pull together from around the world. And that's the expectation of all 10 teams. We definitely haven't shied away from that.
So when you say there is like performance verbiage, I'm taking a page here out of NASCAR, and I may misquote this because I don't follow it that closely, but I believe in their charter system, there is some verbiage in the sense of if you're like the lowest scoring point team, like 2 years in a row, like you're just straight up putting pay drivers in and they're just parking and arriving with cars, like they actually can be forced to sell their charter, basically forced to give up their spot. They don't get it taken from them, but they're basically told, hey, you have to put up for sale. We're going to get somebody else in here that wants to grow and do this. Is that kind of like there's a situation for you guys? If somebody acted in that way, you guys have the ability to get it in the hands of somebody that wants to do something with it.
Yeah, exactly. We do have, similar kind of wording in our agreement that says if they're consistently underperforming, that they can be encouraged, shall we say, to sell to someone that wants it and wants to deliver, to the level we expect. So, and I mean, thankfully, now that we have, the 10 teams we have are fantastic, and we're incredibly proud to have all of them there. But there are teams that want to step in. We've been reached out by multiple that want to come in, and probably some in, international teams that didn't really realize the extent of the fact that they've missed that opportunity now, and so it means that, if any of those 10 didn't want to be part of it or didn't see the value in the investment, I wouldn't be concerned that they couldn't be replaced. But at the same time, we are, 100% invested into the 10 teams that we have. We think they're the right teams, they're the right people involved in those teams, and now that we do have a baseline and a platform there that I think is worthy of their investment into the championship, we really want to, go on that journey with them next year. And I think that's what we'll see. I genuinely do think that everyone's going to want to step up to the plate, and I'm feeling a lot of competitive tension behind the scenes of where teams are like, all right, now I'm going to go after this rider. I'm going to go after this rider, and now I'm going, and I want to, they're very motivated. I can really feel that.
Speaking of the investment in teams and even riders, this might be a bit of a tough question, but I've heard from a couple teams, some that were a bit upset over, say, the Kenny situation, the fact that he received some level of reasoning to come to the series outside of what a team was paying him. Do you foresee to attract talent of his level? Do you foresee something like that happening into next season, or was that kind of a one and done situation to get talent of that in front of the audience and the cameras just for the first year? Do you guys see your stance on that changing at all going into your second year?
I think, like, first and foremost, like, our focus was on the fans and putting on an amazing show. And going into Cardiff, we had 0 teams, we had 0 riders at that point in time to be able to market with or launch with or sell tickets based on. And so I think our focus will always be that. We want to, and we know that there's a period of having to support the teams for them to be able to engage riders of that caliber or the world's best riders early. The fact is, as you're well aware, there's not the manufacturer supporters that there is in other championships around the world. But then those riders still, deserve to be paid, comparable to where they would in other regions around the world. So whether it be the US or Europe or otherwise. So, there's also different ways to look at it. And our situation with Kenny was unique in the sense that it doesn't just mean we didn't just pay him to then place him with any particular team. It was a commitment to him that to guarantee the fact that he could make money and race the championship. But then all teams were offered the opportunity to step up to engage him. And that is something that I think can work in the future where if a rider, if the championship has the opportunity to secure a top level rider, that we may do it in a way that means that as long as it's fair and equal to each teams, and each of the teams have the ability to engage that rider, and then that was something we look at, which is different than how it's done currently. But as long as it's fair and equal to all teams, which some may not have thought that it was this year, but it really was. So we really didn't engage Kenny to place him with the Genuine Honda team that he ended up. Literally at that point in time, we engaged him because he had no ride in the US. He didn't know what brand he was going to be on, what team he was going to be on. And we really wanted to promote the series with him. So we engaged him and then offered the teams the opportunity to take over that engagement, I guess. And that's what ended up happening with Genuine Honda. And it worked out. It worked out well. So I think it's a case by case. I wouldn't say that we're fixed on any certain yes or no, we'll never do that again or anything along those lines. But I think, for this to be successful, we've got to think, outside the box, and we've got to be innovative, and we need and want some of the best riders in the world, and all of the best riders of the world in time. So how we continue to make that happen, nothing's off the table, I guess.
Looking forward into next year, when do you think we will see a public announcement on supposed rounds, venues, some sort of rough schedule? What's kind of your guys' goals for venue or for round quantity next year and things of that nature?
Yeah, we're looking at 6 to 8 rounds and hoping to announce at the end of November, by the end of November. We're in final negotiations with venue contracts, with promoter agreements, and all of that stuff is happening now. Like, as far as venues and dates, for a lot of those, they won't change. It's kind of like the dates are locked and the venues are locked, but you don't want to go public on those kinds of things until contracts are signed, because anything can happen, and we've seen, the risk of things being leaked that aren't necessarily ready to be spoken about, and when things change, it can do more harm than good. So we think by the end of November is realistic, though, and things are traveling really, really well. I mean, the great news is there's a lot of interest. I think, we've always had a lot of interest in terms of promoters and venues and government partners and things around the world wanting, or interested, I should say, But immediately following Cardiff, that accelerated, and then obviously following Melbourne on the weekend, that accelerated another level again. Because again, proof of concept. People saw the fans, they saw, 35,000 people in Cardiff, 50,000 over 2 days in Melbourne. It becomes more real. Whereas before, we were selling a deck, and when as you know, a deck versus proof of concept are two completely different things. So
talk is one thing, action's a whole nother. So I imagine it's made those conversations a lot more simple. I mean, there's still tough parts to talk about, but now it's not all having to explain to them, hey, like this is what it's gonna look like. Here's what it looked like. Now you can see it, you can feel it, you could touch it, you've maybe gone and experienced it. There's still a level of conversation after that, but I'm sure that is to an extent making your guys' job a little bit easier going forward.
Oh, big time. And data, I mean, we had nothing really. We had previous history from events in 2019 being the last one that we'd had in Melbourne with the WSX Open, and but people want data. They want to have real sales metrics. They want to have real audience data, the real profiling, and to be able to develop a business case, and just prove ourselves. We understood that, you've got to, like I said, talk is cheap, and this we're gonna, that was probably what was getting annoying and getting tiring, is talking about something and not actually having delivered it. And I think that was what was the most important about getting this season and getting these events done, was to not be talking about it. If we were still talking about it going into next July when the season will start, I mean, people would still be hanging back waiting to see, will we actually run an event, and can we actually run an event? Will it actually get off the ground? And I think now hopefully that those sort of messages are gone and we can move forward.
Speaking of data and just experiencing it, so one I'm really curious of, being a US fan, we have plenty of people, they may only go to one Supercross a year, but because it's been available for years, maybe they've been going to the same Supercross for 10, 15 years or something, or they get to go to a couple a year. I understand you have your fanatic fans that no matter whatever year are going to buy a t-shirt, they're gonna stand in the autograph lines, they're gonna be a little bit more engaged. But again, we have a lot of them that they have so much exposure to it, it maybe doesn't mean as much. So going into Cardiff and Melbourne, were you guys surprised at all? Was it barely, like, I'm just thinking those guys don't get, well, it's kind of like Cardiff, they don't get to experience this. So how early the fans are showing up, how many of them are standing in the autograph lines, how many are buying t-shirts, stuff like that. Was it I'm guessing that's a good one to have some data on, actually see if they engaged or not.
Yeah, I mean, it was nuts. Honestly, it was nuts. And it was really motivating, and I don't want to say reassuring, because we were confident in that, but it was really motivating to see the fan reaction for the riders. I mean, Melbourne in Australia, is our backyard, so we expected it. We know that even by having that WSX Open event, the fan reaction was huge. But in Cardiff was just an amazing and humbling experience, because the streets were full of people. They're blowing the air horns like they do at European events. The bars were full, by lunchtime. People were so into it. The autograph line completely blew out and caught us by surprise. And, it actually turned into a sort of operational nightmare because there were so many people. Which was amazing, because our team kind of thought, oh, we'll do an autograph signing, it's going to be midday, there's probably not going to be anyone around, but let's do it anyway. And my God, they just got mobbed. It was huge, and fans yelling out at riders, like, I know, they really were like rock stars there. And that is, to your point, it's because they don't get to see them. And I think in that this whole concept is about taking the World Supercross Championship to fans that don't get the opportunity to see this level of professional Supercross anywhere else. They haven't seen it, and you guys in the US are so lucky, because you get to see these guys ride all the time, and you get to see them ride the practice track, and anyone can drive down to the test tracks in Corona and go and check them out, but you can't. People have gone their whole lives, and I know Chad Reed. I spoke with Chad Reed yesterday, and he said he had a fully grown man in tears because he'd never seen him ride before, and he just wanted to see him ride. Like, this is is special to these people. And I know myself, when I was a young guy and I came to the US and got to see Ricky Carmichael ride a Supercross truck for the first time, and I was just so stoked that I could say that I got to see him ride Supercross, you know. And there's this whole level of passion, and I want to say appreciation for the opportunity to even just see these guys in the flesh and see them do what they do best. And I really felt it this year that they, I mean, the amount of, you know, thank you messages we get is incredible, you know, and that is what's really special, because they're thanking us that we brought it to them, because not everyone can just afford to jump on a plane and go to the US and go see one of these events, you know. So it was really, really special, and something I honestly think we can replicate around the world. And I hope that we go to South America and we go to regions in Europe, and we see that same reaction where the fans are just so stoked to see them in person, you know.
Now, a conversation we had earlier this year was about the names in the series. Like, I think we talked about, you know, could you do this without the Lawrences, without the Kennys, without the Elis of the world? You got some of those names, but again, a lot of mid-tier names in there. The reaction again from fans, does it surprise y'all? Because again, these guys don't get to experience any of these guys. So I feel like even a Dean Wilson, even a Max Anstie, even a Mitch Oldenburg probably actually hold a decent amount of start. Like, it's still interesting to these guys. Again, I know you guys would love to have the big names, but the riders that have stepped up to do your series and believed in you guys, do you see more of an opportunity to actually turn them into the stars of your series now, seeing how just fans are reacting in general to just getting to see these guys ride?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think also, like, the racing again was incredible. So, and you know, there's only 20% of our attendees that are really hardcore fans, you know, and that really know who Kenny is or Eli is, really, truthfully. Do you know? So the rest are coming for a show, and they're coming to see some incredible racing. And, you know, like I said, the Australian Championship on the Friday night was incredible racing. And so that was a great show before the World Championship even started on Saturday night. You know what I mean? So, you know, there's definitely certain people where the top riders is an absolute of importance to them, and they won't come unless they're there. Well, in saying that, will they not come anyway, or will they still come, you know, because they want to be part of it, and the overall event and the overall show is what they're there for more so. You know, we all want to see the best riders, and I think having you know, Kenny as part of the championship was amazing. Seeing Eli and Cardiff was fantastic, and definitely fans really loved that. But I wouldn't say the fan reaction in Melbourne was any less without Eli there either, to be completely honest with you. You know, I don't think we didn't get a single message saying that we're bummed the Lawrences didn't come, not one. Didn't get a single message saying we're bummed that Eli didn't come, this sucks, not one, you know. So I think, of course, we want the best riders in the world, and we'll make sure the platform is worthy and that they want to be part of it. But the riders that are part of it, regardless, will be projected into the limelight and will receive exposure, you know, fantastic exposure for themselves, their brands, and their teams. So, you know, it's kind of a parallel approach, really, which is, we want to build up the championship riders, all of them, in their own right, their own personalities, and their own kind of, you know, history. But then also build a platform that is deserving of the best riders in the world participating, no matter where they're from also. So, you know, from a fan's perspective, I think that what we had was a fantastic balance of that.
Something else I wanted to get your thoughts on. It's definitely a bit of a backtrack situation, and again, a little bit tougher maybe conversation to have, but something you mentioned earlier about Kenny, about bringing him, about the financials, and being that there isn't some of the major OEMs involved, which, you know, a lot of us in the industry have talked about it. I personally did some kind of explaining some of the pay structures of, like, how involved OEMs are in American racing in funding a lot of these bonus structures and things that make it worth these guys going racing. Flashing back to you guys coming over here early in the year, having those conversations, kind of running into the wall a little bit with OEMs. Now that you've had time to sit on it, think about it, get through your racing, you know, did any of that catch you off guard? Or are you still surprised in the end that maybe you guys got some of the reaction from the OEMs here? Is there anything now after seeing time to reflect on it that makes you go, okay, I understand why? Or is it still like kind of, again, is it kind of caught you guys off guard, the tensions that have developed in a way?
I mean, some of it caught us off guard. I think to the level, I don't think we ever expected support. I don't think we ever expected, and we did meet with the manufacturers in the US, but we never went to them cap in hand asking for money at all. We didn't go to any manufacturers asking for money. I think the opposite. We went to them saying, we would love your support, as in, we want you to be part of this, but we're not asking you for money. That was kind of one of the things that we wanted to do. So, but we also didn't manage ourselves well at the start, well enough, and the messaging wasn't great at the start. A couple of meetings were probably a bit too, from our side, too brash. And I think, I think that, we could have handled it better, and I think definitely if we were to have our time again would be, I don't know, coming across a little bit differently or a bit more humbly. I mean, I don't think that it was ever our intention to come across as big shots, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality of it is, we did come in to and announce that we're going to do a world championship. That we have a large international investor, and we did announce that, and so there kind of became this kind of big shot mentality, which that kind of took me by surprise, because I'm a racer. I grew up racing myself. Like I'm a privateer racer here in Australia that have been able to create a career in running events in motocross and supercross and managing riders, and I've done TV announcing and done all the shitty jobs along the way to be in the position that I'm. Yeah, so there's no big shots coming into town here saying we're going to take over and we're going to and screw the establishment, because we're huge fans, like the biggest fans. Like I told you earlier, like my story of going to see Ricky Carmichael is legit. Like I love Supercross in the States. I'm a huge fan of it, and motocross. I've raced an amateur day at Washougal once upon a time, and I've been to some of the pro motocross events, and I'm a huge fan myself. So we never came in wanted to take away from anything. And all we wanted to do was build on what is there already. We reached out to Feld to tell them that, and had a call with Dave Prater, which I thought went really well. So, but still, the messaging still wasn't right, and somehow that kind of got lost in translation. And I know the things that we need to change, and our approach needed to change and improve, which we're trying to do now, and have been for a while, to try and change that messaging. Because that is the truth. We're not here to take away from anything. We think the sport's incredible. We're huge fans of what happens in the States. We just want to build on it and take it around the world. That's the truth of it. So, and when it came to the manufacturers, or the distributors in the States, again, we didn't expect them to help us, because we know that Feld had wanted to go internationally before, and they'd said no, because they sell bikes in the US, and it makes complete sense that they would focus on selling bikes in the US. That is got to be their focus, and it would be remiss to expect anything other than that. But I also didn't expect the pushback and I think there was a point where it's gone beyond looking after the best interests of their own racing in the States and trying to block us out of principle, and that was disappointing, because I think all of that, the only thing that did is put up barriers for the fans and those riders. There's riders that lost. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars that would have gone to riders that didn't go to riders because of that situation. A lot of top riders missed out on a lot of money, and fans missed out on seeing riders they really wanted to see. So that was the part that was disappointing, because I felt like, hey, now you're out of principle wanting to stop us, even though we're not trying to get in the way, or what we're wanting to do is build on the sport and invest into the sport. But it's the move is at the detriment of fans and the riders themselves, which is the two of the three things that we're trying to build, and it didn't hurt us, it hurt them, and so, that I'd like to change. I hope that we can change it to the point where it is just business. If something can't work, if a team in the US has to protect their asset because they've got something on or another event on, I completely get that and understand that. But as long as it, the conversation remains focused on that and business, not a kind of mentality of we got to stop these guys because they're trying to take everything away from us, because that's just not the truth.
So it's kind of a multi-part question. I could see the answer landing somewhere kind of in the middle, but so those conversations, it kind of circles back also to what I said earlier. You have this group of riders that are now with you guys are really excited about. Like, I think I've talked to, just seen some interviews and talked to some of these guys like a Shane McElrath and a Joey Savacci. I know those two really enjoyed the series. I know even talking towards US, it seems like they're really focused on a deal that will allow them still to race with you guys next year. So you have riders, again, that are committed, that can be the star of your series. You've seen the reaction that, yes, the big names are important, but at the same time, people are pretty excited to see these dudes in general. So my question really is kind of as it goes forward, do you see your guys self in a situation where it's like, okay, let's just take a step back and focus on our product and making the riders happy and the fans happy, and eventually if the OEMs want to come, cool? Or do you still feel like there's a part of you that's like, man, we want to circle back with them in a year or two and you want to try to draw them? Do you feel like you're going to have to still talk to them and draw them in, or is it kind of more like, nah, we'll just do our thing, and if we do a good product, they'll come?
It's mostly the former. It's mostly us just focusing on the product. I mean, mostly because we feel like, and we have always felt, if we produce a product worthy and give the global exposure that we promise, and that the sport is, that we have, packed fans around the world, and the fan reaction is strong, and that the fans want to see Supercross around the world the way we think that they will, and that it's worthy of the manufacturers wanting to support the teams that are involved in there because they want to win it. That's our number one thing. It's kind of like, we never wanted to kind of beg them to come in unless they see genuine value in what we're doing. And so that's our number one thing, is to build value in what we're doing, so that those teams and riders projected around the world, so that the championship is worthy of being a genuine, authentic global world championship. And then I think, competition and the way these brands work is that they'll want to step in and they'll want to win, and they'll want to, increase their level of support to make sure they win that. So it also, on the flip side, it doesn't mean that we don't want to have great relationships with the manufacturers, because we absolutely do. And we want them to feel that we're approachable, and we want to feel in a cohesive kind of relationship with them, whether they are or not involved in the championship. And I like to think, this year, to clarify, Honda sponsored both of our events in the UK and in Australia. They're a great sponsor of ours. Yamaha sponsored in Australia as well. KTM sponsored in Australia as well. So, we actually have a fantastic relationship with the manufacturers. It was just the US arms of those manufacturers that were really, against what we were trying to do, because I think that, there's a misconception about us wanting to take away from what is happening in the US, which that is what we would like to, that relationship is what we'd like to repair. We just want it to be, clear that what we're trying to do is build on the sport. We're investing millions of dollars to growing the sport around the world. We don't want to take away from what happens in the US one bit.
One other thing I wanted to talk about from a clarification standpoint was, this was a personal opinion of mine of watching the first race is coming in. The announcing side is, the perception of where you guys stand with what the series is and what it is to the history of what exists. So it comes in right off the bat that we've got, Ralph Shaheen. This is the first ever World Supercross Championship that's ever happened. And then turns around immediately goes, this is Jeff Emig, the 1996 FIM World Supercross champion. And I felt like on that first broadcast for the first bit, there was a lot of back and forth where it'd be like, this is the first ever World Supercross Championship heat race winner, but this is Justin Bray, 18th heat race win. Towards the end of the show, they definitely circled back and they kind of covered over, well, there was, FIM's been this before and transferred over. For you guys internally, has that been kind of a hard issue to how do we present the series? Where do we stand on what it is now and what existed before, what it means to it? Is that something you guys have kind of found a path on how to present it to the fans, or is that something you guys are still kind of working through?
I think that was more of a communication internally and getting everyone on board on the way we want to speak. And because we do want to celebrate previous world champions. Absolutely. Our original hype reels, showed a lot of the previous, world champions, and so we definitely wanted to celebrate the previous champions and the previous results and all of those things, regardless of who the previous promoter is in Feld. That was never, we didn't want to ignore the history, ignore the past. but really the message is this is the first time the World Championship is going to go around the world, and that's something that we're really proud of, and that's something that we're excited by, and that's one of our major points of difference. So we definitely want to celebrate that, but without taking away from the fact that there has been fantastic world champions for a number of years, racing in the US. And so it's a balance that we probably didn't strike completely right, but the real answer is we want to do both. We want to celebrate the fact that these world champions, and the World Championship has been a fantastic world championship held within the United States for a long period of time. Those riders well and truly deserve those accolades that they've received. But what we're doing is new because we're going around the world, and it's the part of us not, wanting to take away from what's being done in the US, because we're not. We want to celebrate it, but also celebrate the fact that we're going around the world. So it is a it's difficult to get all that messaging right. And I think, it's more about that and just teething of the messaging and how it's presented, as opposed to, confusion as to how we want to present. I think it's really clear. We want to celebrate the past champions and the World Championship that has been for a number of years, again, racing in the United States. But we want to take that thing around the world now, and we want to celebrate that too.
So speaking of, my perspective watching the show, something I was genuinely pretty excited about was some of the difference in the broadcasts. I know you guys are still going to work through some issues with the onboard cameras. The first race, some of them didn't work as well. It looked like placement, some things worked better for round two. One I was genuinely very happy to see was, because you see it in MotoGP, you see it in F1, fast lap times, segment times that actually update green, purple, like segment centers. That is it sounds like the most basic thing, but I freaking love that, again, coming from F1 and being a huge F1 fan, being able to watch actual time qualifying and be excited because you can follow a guy through the lap and be like, oh, he's up in 2 sectors. Like, he has a shot at this. So me personally, it's a small thing, but that was actually one of the things I enjoyed the most about the broadcast. For yourself, with some of the things you guys try to implement, what were you excited about that you guys brought to the broadcast side to the viewer?
It's a fantastic question. I mean, I love some of the angles in Melbourne. Like, I thought the Cardiff broadcast was okay, but we had a lot of areas that we, straight away we wanted to improve on. There's no question. But I thought the Melbourne broadcasts, some of the angles were awesome. We had a live drone following them around for the Super Pole lap, which I thought was really cool. We had the spider cam, which is obviously an amazing perspective. The onboard stuff, is really, really cool, and it's unique, but it needs fine tuning. And it's, as a rider, you want to see the rider's eye view, which is hard to achieve, because there's a whole level of complication to mount live cameras on anything, but let alone if you're trying to put cameras on helmets and, or on riders and things like that. So, which we obviously haven't worked through yet. So, there's a lot of area to improve on that side of things for sure. There's no question. But yeah, I think just overall, what I was most proud of was the improvement from Cardiff to Melbourne. I think, like, some of the angles in Melbourne, I think it really proved that we could pull together a slick, world-class World Championship production, and it helps set the bar for what we're going to do, moving forward. So overall, I think it's just the overall level of improvement, the overall quality of it, I'm super proud of. And some of those innovations, we want to push the boundary, like the onboard cameras. Whilst, there's fine tuning to be done there, it's still innovative. It hadn't been done before. We had bikes with 3 cameras on them facing various, one at the rider, one out the back, one out the front. It's not easy to pull off. The technology to do that is tough, and within a stadium too, it's actually really tough to do, and there's a reason why it's not done. So it needs fine tuning, but I was really proud that we're able to pull that stuff off.
Yeah, I remember when the Lit Pro guys were pulling live data for the onboard they did on the TV a couple times, knowing some of the guys that work there. Open air stadiums, awesome. Full indoor stadiums, it was a massive struggle, even using piggybacking off some of the broadcast equipment. They were having a very tough time making it work. I would think of, like, just the perspective is tough on dirt bike. Like, I saw some of the mounting locations. The first thing that hit me is like, dirt bike pitches and travels a lot. Like, it makes it really hard to keep those views in perspective. Like, MotoGP has the really cool back gyro cam, but the rear of their bikes, even though it's a rear shock and it can move just as much, their bike, it's settled a lot more, so their view is a little bit easier to work with. And even I think of, like, Formula One's always had the one up above the roll hoop for a long time. even this year they finally got one. They somehow got it in the helmets through the visor view, and it's amazing again that difference in 10, 12 inches of perspective, how much gnarlier that view is when you finally hit the right view. It's truly a pretty cool viewing
Yeah,
experience.
absolutely. And yeah, and we'll continue to investigate all opportunities along that line to bring a whole different viewer experience. It's super important. It's really high on the agenda, and but it is difficult. It's challenging, like, and we're not going to get it right first time every time, and but that's the whole reason for innovating, right? It's gonna be a challenge.
So yeah, we had a couple events. Even saying all that, I imagine it's nice to get them over with, but I'm sure you guys would love to have a couple more to, again, just trial things. I guess that's the beauty of a series as new is, I think here on the US side, we struggle with this a lot. I have these conversations with people about our series, whether it's Supercross or motocross. I understand it. Motocross, there's a lot of history to it. There's a lot of attachment because a lot of people grow up doing it. So there's a certain, like, let's not mess with the formats. It has legacy. I've always viewed US Supercross like this, but a lot of people still don't. It is sort of a show. It is a way to propel riders to a greater viewership, to try to make the money, to try to grow the sport. But people get really hung up on, well, you can't cut down that main. That's just not hardcore enough, or this or that. That's just not how guys do it. I'm like, when did any of us line up and ever do it? I rolled around a Supercross track a couple times, tried to double some stuff. It didn't work out so well. So I do appreciate, like, I kind of hope going in next year, even though you guys are going to hit a longer championship, there's still that opportunity to try stuff. Because again, you're in a new state. Like, you're not locked into this, oh, we have all this legacy, this way that it has to be done. There's all that room still to grow and figure out how to actually propel this to the highest heights possible.
Yeah, totally. And that is the risk, right? Because you try something that doesn't work, you get slammed for it. But if you don't try anything, then you never move forward, and you don't innovate, and we become stale before you start. So you got to, I guess there's a level of risks to take, like in trying these things. I mean, doing the series in the first place is the ultimate level of that. But trying onboard cameras and trying them, and hardcore, and trying different formats, and like you said, hardcore fans will slam you if it's not. Yeah, well, some will slam you regardless, because that's just the sort of nature of fans, and that's all fine. But you're not going to win it every time. And I think that what we have to do, and what we, it's important for us, is to just kind of own it when we try something and it doesn't work, and just go, you know what, we tried it, didn't work, or we had to improve, or what, but not lose that spirit of trying things and trying to innovate. And I think that'll be the balance for us moving forward, is because you want to continually push the boundaries, but you never want to disengage the hardcore fans either, because they're like you and I. They're the ones that they're going to come along, and they're your friends in this whole thing. So it's a balance. You're bringing new fans, but don't disengage the old ones. And I think that it'll be a constant kind of, we'll have to check ourselves all the time to be like, hey, are we pushing the boundary for the sake of it, or is this actually going to be better for the fan experience? And I think as long as you're constantly asking yourself that, and doing it for the right reasons, then you can own it, whether it goes well or not,
So my last question before we get out of here, it's a very current thing after the race. It's all the talk this week is the Justin Brain Vince Freeze incident, especially as if, what JB has been talking about publicly is more true, with the accusation of Vince potentially bribing somebody to take him out. Like, this gets to a pretty extreme case from your guys' standpoint on the promoter side. Like, does this become something that becomes investigated? Like, has this circulated your guys' office much this week on what the heck to do about that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm blown away by that. I mean, yeah, I had no idea until yesterday that was even that JB was saying that, and I'm a huge JB fan. Obviously, I think he's one of the most straight up great guys in the world. So.
And it's shocking to me because, like, there's stuff that's happened in JB's career with past teams and stuff. He's not the kind of guy to go out there. Like, he's probably stayed minced words on things I'm surprised the man will stay, like, silent on. So when he's the kind of guy that comes out and is that aggressive, like, this freaking happened and I'm talking about it, that really makes me, like, at the end of the day, got to figure it out if everything is totally lines up and is true. But JB's kind of one of those guys that doesn't cry wolf and doesn't bring up issues very often.
No, but I'd just be, I'd personally be so surprised. I mean, I got to spend some time with Vince. I found him to be a really nice, polite, great guy. Honestly, like I feel like you know, I know some of the stuff you know, the way he rides on the track that isn't always well received, but as a person, I found him to be a really respectful, good person. And you know, one thing I'd say is I never want to see social hate. I think it's really unfair of people bashing people on social media, and some of the things that people say about him, sometimes it makes me, you know, like unsure about us as a community and us as a sport. And I know it's all sports, but at times, but you don't want to just bash people and say things if you don't know the guy or don't know the details. I don't think it's right that people will, you know, will do that. And unfortunately, social media gives people that voice. Like I said, I found him to be incredibly polite, great guy. You know, he was visibly really unhappy after that final race on the weekend of how the result went, you know, because he was in a good, you know, in a good running. And I know that their team had, you know, enormous kind of drama post-event. It's kind of like from our side as the promoter, you want drama, you want people to be passionate. You want people to race hard, fight hard, and do everything they got to do, you know, to win, because you want the championship to have enough prestige that they want to win bad enough. But at the same time, the integrity of this sport is obviously incredibly important. And we're running a world championship. We want to have the highest level of credibility and integrity that there possibly can be. So I've got no idea what actually was or wasn't said. I mean, you know, I've seen obviously the footage of the replays of Vince hitting JB. It was a real bummer. The reality is I just don't know how we'll ever know other than the direct people involved. But I will say that I think that, you know, it's us for fans. I think we just got to see how it pans out.
For you guys in this situation, though, is it something you guys end up looking into, or is this something that gets left in the hands of the FIM as the officiators? Is this something that gets passed on to their officials and you just let them basically deal with the, you know, figure out if there's anything really to it?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's what their FIM are there for. It's to officiate and uphold the rules. Like that is their main function, you know. So for us, it's kind of provide the footage of what we have, which we did. We've just said, here's all the footage, you know, of the, you know, from the racing, and that's all from our side of things. That's all we can do. We'll manage the messaging out from the fans' perspective. You know, when we learn anything, you know, or things come to light. But for us to get involved in the he said or she said or anything like that isn't our role. Our role is to promote the sport in the best possible light and make it an amazing entertainment property. And it's their job to kind of officiate and uphold the rules and decide whether someone did or didn't, you know, do the wrong thing. You know, it was really interesting. I mean, to see all that come out really surprised me. I've never seen never seen anything like that in Supercross. Yeah. Heard that said, like I said, JB's a great guy, one of my favorite in the whole sport. You know, so I was disappointed that he was so disappointed for him, you know, about whatever happened there. You know, it was a real bummer. And I was equally bummed in a way for Vince because I did find him to be a good guy. And I'm like, man, why did, you know, like he's going to get a really bad rap for whatever has happened here. And you know, I think, like I said, as long as it stays sort of sporting and, you know, above board and not sort of like bullying and social hate, then we'll let it pan out and see what happens.